I'd like to welcome Ben Brown to the stage here at our virtual Farm Science Review. And again, if you have questions, use the Q&A. We will be keeping an eye on those. And Ben, I love the title of your presentation here, how to get $4 corn. But what I'm really interested in is how to get $5 corn.
No,
And so
and that's become more realistic as of late, right, Chris? When I started this,
oh,
when you all were sourcing presentation topics back this summer, I was really, really tempted to put how to get $4 corn and $10 beans, and I didn't do that in the nature of time. But maybe I subconsciously knew we were going to get $10 beans right now, so I don't know if that was the reason for it or not, but.
we don't want to talk about everybody that contracted beans at 950 thinking it was a great deal. And at the time, it probably was a great deal. Who knew? But you also sent a set of questions here to kind of help us guide this conversation. And if you get through everything that you have written here, we'll be here for another hour. So we're going to have to abbreviate this a little bit, but I thank you for your thoroughness. But again, you picked the title, $4 corn. And can you give us a blueprint as we look ahead in terms of if we still have corn to sell, how might we think about doing that?
Yeah, and you mentioned something really good, Chris, early on. We've got a lot of producers. My phone's been ringing off the hook the last, I'm going to say a couple of weeks, but really the last week, people that have been a little upset that they sold early and didn't wait till later, right? And this happens, right? There's times where things the chips all fall in the right place late in the summer, early fall, to where we get these harvest rallies, these rallies that we don't normally see. It makes everybody think, oh, I should have just stuck everything in the bin, or I shouldn't have made early season sales. And these are going to come up. We can't anticipate them, and I mean, we can put probabilities around it, but again, it's one of these things that I want people to encourage people to think about the law of probabilities and think about, okay, if I do something the same way all the time, which route and which decisions do I make that I can consistently do to where I'm going to put myself in the best possible position. And that's ultimately, if you hear me talk, I around the state, I've said this multiple times, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this time. But we like this incentive of reward versus punishment. We're humans, so we react to rewards and incentives, and we also respond to punishment. And there was a great study done by B.F. Skinner, who is the guy that kind of looked at, can I get a pigeon to play ping pong, or can I get a dog to salivate, at the sound of a bell? And basically what he did is he tested people with random choice, and given several choices, which, was there a way to get a reward? For instance, if you hit a lever and it spits out food, can you get reward more often than you don't? And what he found was that mice were the best at this, because the mice would just go and hit the same lever all the time. Whereas humans, we like to overthink things and hit different levers. And what happens is, we pick lever 1 when it's lever 3 that spits us out the candy, or we pick lever 3 when it's lever 1 that spits us out the candy, and we end up missing the reward. And so when I look at, the blueprint for this, Chris, it's really about consistency, doing the same thing every year. And when you get to years like this, to where your plan is maybe not rewarding you for this harvest price rally, just know that your plan is set up in place to give you the best possible probability of outcomes over a long run period. And that's ultimately what we're out to do every year, right? So I think about, how do we get $4 corn? How do we get higher beans? Right. The way we do this, and I got this title, really, this was a presentation that Ed Ussett did at the University of Minnesota. I saw his title somewhere else. I thought it was really good. I thought it really kind of captured what we try to do. And what the ultimate objective is to be managers of our crop and managers of our marketing from start to finish. And when I say start, I'm not talking about the day the combines are rolling in the field. I'm talking, Chris, about starting, in January of the previous harvest, before you've even gotten the crop in the ground. Are there opportunities to market this product? I'm a big believer in early season marketing. You've heard me talk, Chris. I like early season marketing, but the way I look at it is you've got 2 opportunities to market your grain: pre-harvest and post-harvest. If you miss the first one, if you miss the pre-harvest, you're left with just one option. You're left with the post-harvest, and you don't get to go back, right? You're not getting to go back to that pre-harvest if that turns out to be the best option. So it's your due diligence to look at the pre-harvest, and if it offers you opportunities to market your grain, I hope people take care of that. And with today's crop insurance program on the commodity side, there's really, that's helping shore up the production shortfall risk. I mean, there's no reason not to look at pre-harvest marketing plans, even though I hear all the time producers say, well, I can't market something I don't have, or I don't know how much I'm going to produce. Truth is, we can look at that. So that's step one. Second thing is look for common sense opportunities to use option prices. What I find is that producers are a little hesitant of option prices because they don't understand them. But in a lot of ways, option prices are more straightforward and less risky than futures prices, because if you're using the right option tool at the right time, there's only a certain amount of money you can lose, right? It's the cost of the option, but there's an upside potential to it. So in a lot of ways, option prices provide us an opportunity to buy an insurance product against our risk and participate in the market without taking on additional risk. And we already know what it's going to cost us. It's the cost of that call or put, or if we're selling it, it's the benefit of that. The last 2 years have given us great opportunities to look at options. Last year with corn, the corn price in July was like $4.60 in July of 2019. However, if you looked at USDA yield forecasts, there was every indication that yields were going to fall, yields were going to come in big and price was going to fall. If we looked at this, we were well above most producers' price or cost of production. They could lock in a futures price, take the advantage there. But if they wanted to, basically guarantee themselves a price ceiling, if you will, they could buy a put option. And then as the price declined, that put option was paying the money. If the price kept going up, you were just out that 10 cents, 15 cents, whatever it cost to buy the put option. This year, the reverse is happening. We're heading into harvest, and we've got a great opportunity to buy some calls on soybeans and take advantage of this low carry. And we'll talk about carry a little bit later. So we've got some opportunities. The last 2 years have provided us opportunities for these common sense, what I like to call common sense option contracts. It's thinking about where am I at, where's my price, am I profitable at this price, and what do I think price is going to do, and am I comfortable if I lose 10 cents? Last year, I was comfortable losing 10 cents because I was like 50 cents above my cost of production at that point. Ended up working. Doesn't always work. Sometimes you lose that 10 cents. Third thing is know and track your basis. Know what your local markets look like, what's driving your local basis markets, when are you seasonally strong, when are you not, right? So keep track and look for basis opportunities, because that tells you what type of contract, whether a forward contract, a futures contract, a hedge to arrive, a basis contract. That's what those basis prices, local basis prices tell you. Then once we get to harvest, look for storage, right? Is the market incenting me to store or not, right? And this is where it becomes, storage is a completely separate decision whether than selling your crop. Most producers would push back against me and say that no, it is not. But it is absolutely a separate decision. When you get to harvest, it is no longer more about whether you think prices are going to go up or down. You're just trying to maximize what the market is giving you for storage. And as a result, you're going to be able to use that to your advantage. So if we're looking at carry in the market, or are those deferred futures months higher than our current month, that's the market telling us that we can store and generate a pretty nice profit for that. So we're going to look at market carry. And again, when we get into those harvest months, we're also looking at harvest basis. Cash basis, December through or October through March, we're looking to see, are there patterns in our seasonal basis? So that's the blueprint. If you add all those up together, it adds up to about a 70-cent gain every year, Chris, in terms of, can we pick up some extra cents in the market? And earlier this year, when we were looking at $3 corn, $3.30 corn, if you get 70 cents through this pattern on a typical year, you're at $4 corn. So that's ultimately what I want to talk about today, and the blueprint for kind of what we, at least in academic sense, seem to think the probabilities tell us.
Okay, well, let's jump right into that. Halfway through our time here, so we need to be cognizant of that and get through all of this. The right way to do early season marketing. I know several of my farmers that work off the farm don't have on-farm storage, and they're really locked into needing to do this part right. So how do you advise people to do early season marketing?
Yeah, and early season marketing is really a strategic decision. We're looking at, and this is where cost of production comes in. For those folks that are sitting out there saying, I don't care about cost of production, I wish academics would stop talking about cost of production because I just want to be in the top third of my market. My message to those folks is you're being a speculator. You're not being a risk manager. You'll never hear me say not to look at cost of production when making marketing decisions because that's taking into account all risk, both market risk and financial risk of your operation. So it really becomes a strategic risk. Add in your crop insurance programs. What are you covered at in terms of your production shortfalls? That should flow into your early season decisions as well. But then the question that always comes up is, are there certain times of the year when early season marketing makes most sense? And historically, if you look back over, the last 15 years, even last 5, the probabilities still work out. April through June continue to be our best months to do early season marketing. Now, this year it didn't work out that way because we were dealing with a global pandemic. I don't know if we hadn't had that global pandemic, would we still see this rise in prices now? Probably, because we probably would still be exporting. We'd have shorter crops than what we thought we did. I'm following Aaron, so he talked all about this in the weather section. But we need to be strategic on that early season marketing, both with crop insurance and cost of production. When we look at what this can give us, 74% of the time, the price in May is higher than the price in October. 74% of the time. So that means 26% of the time, the price is higher in October than May. And if we look at those difference, we're picking up an extra 30 cents just by picking dates in that April to June timeframe where we can market. I've had people do everything from, I've got 7 dates, let's say the 1st of June or the 1st of April, the middle of April, the end of April, the middle of May, the end of May, dates like that to where they just pick dates and they sell every year on that date. And I've got people that put in price targets and say, I'm not going to sell anything until cash corn gets to 320. I like a mixture of both because on those price target sides, you're waiting for better prices. And so you're not selling too low. But in some of those scenarios, if you're not careful, it becomes June and you haven't sold anything, or July and you haven't sold anything. So I think a balanced approach to that makes a lot of sense, and make sure that you're at least putting some sales on the book ahead of time. But again, this, on the corn side, I could talk about soybeans, but on the corn side, you're picking up 34 cents a year on average over a period of time just by early season marketing. So something to keep in mind. Thanks, Chris.
Okay. Next question, basis. So what do we need to be paying attention to on basis?
Yeah, and I'll make this one really quick. Mostly, I could spend a whole talk, and maybe next year I'll do my talk on basis. But basis is to me the most fundamental part of a producer's grain marketing strategy because it's also the thing we have the least amount of knowledge about. And it's the thing that is most confusing to producers. They know futures price most of the time, and they know what their local elevator is offering them for cash price, but rarely do we track and look at those basis prices and the trends in basis. The thing I would just put forward is there are ways to track basis, but if you're not tracking your local basis yourself, I would encourage you to start doing that. We're trying to find ways to help you out here at Ohio State. Purdue at the Center for Commercial Ag's got a great tool as well. But basically, it comes down to the questions of how well do you know the fundamentals of corn and soybeans in your local area? What is driving your market? Is it an ethanol plant? Is it livestock feeding? Is it a flour mill? Whatever that driver of local supply and demand is, know what that is because that'll help you track. For instance, if your local market is mostly driven by exports, any change in international exports is really going to affect your local basis. And we saw that with North Dakota a couple of years ago. For us, in Ohio last year, we had a short corn crop and we saw a lot of prevent plant. We saw that local basis really skyrocket. So track and know your basis. Know when it's seasonally strong and when it's seasonally weak. We're still strong relatively to our seasonal averages at the moment. And we've seen that pattern. Now the difference is there's a difference between cash basis and harvest basis. And so in some cases, elevators have a different basis levels depending on where it's at. But I encourage you to track that and look at that. But it's really the basis contracts that tell you what type of contract to use. If basis is strong and futures are relatively strong as well, that signals there's a short crop across the country, and a forward contract might be ideal because you're taking both, you're capturing that strong basis and strong futures. If basis is weak but futures are strong, meaning you have a lot of corn in your local area or maybe demand just dropped off, a futures contract or Hedge to arrive might make a lot of sense in that case. Hedge to arrive, you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about the margin contracts because your elevator usually takes care of those for you as well. So, just keep in mind that it's basis that usually helps us decide which contracts to use early on.
And Ben, just to mention, I know down here in Southern Ohio, when we were looking at the river market, which would be exports versus the livestock markets, there was a 20-cent difference in basis a month ago on corn and soybeans. And so, just knowing where your market is probably helps there too.
Yep.
Following that up, how can producers use market carry to influence that storage decision for what I'm going to put in the bin and what I'm not?
Yeah, and I'll go really quick on this real quick. And I told you about how storage decisions need to be separate from, your marketing, your preseason marketing up to that point, right? So when you get to harvest, take a look at this and see what your storage options are, and can we capture some market carry in the market and take advantage of opportunities. One of the things that we hear a lot, it's probably the most common grain strategy there is I'm going to stick all my crop in the bin and I'm just going to wait until better prices in the spring. We see that a lot. A lot of producers do that. The other common strategy is people sell everything across the board. So this is getting back to your comment, Chris, about producers that don't have any storage, on-farm storage. And we're just going to sell everything across the scales at the elevator and we're going to buy it all back on paper. When I ask people about that, normally they tell me that that's their way of avoiding storage cost or having to worry about shrink in the market or shrink and spoilage in the crop. But then I look at it, and a couple of years ago, we had really large carry, and I think back to soybeans. So this is off corn to soybeans for just saying. We had a huge carry in the soybean market 2-3 years ago. And I had producers doing this strategy. They were selling everything across the scales and then buying a really expensive call, like a 30-cent call for a March contract. Well, you're still paying the storage. You're not paying the physical storage, but you're paying for that really expensive call. When that strategy works is when the carry is really low, meaning that the deferred months aren't that much higher than what the current month is telling us. And so when that carry's weak or narrow, that's our great opportunity to sell across the scales and buy a cheap call. Right now, soybean calls for, May, are 8 cents. So you could buy, and basically what that's saying is that the market just has to rally 8 cents before you kick that call in. And when we know that the market's tight, that's signaling it needs soybeans now, and there's a chance that that'll increase. So, we kind of have there's a confusion a little bit on how to use these storage signals and when to buy, paper contracts to carry into the market. And so that's something that I would just kick around for thought, Chris.
Okay, the last question that you have here is what do producers need to watch out for when making that decision to move grain to the elevator?
Yeah, and so in this case, if we've already taken into account and tied up our carry and captured that carry, no longer are we looking at futures markets. Now we're just looking at what does our local basis do? Is that signaling us to bring grain into the elevator from off farm? And so this is, again, back to, making sure we understand what creates basis, that difference between futures price and cash basis, or futures price and cash. That's creating our basis, and do we see opportunities for that basis to strengthen and to move it onto farm? If you look, I think a lot of farmers, and I said this, they store and wait for price rallies later in the spring. If you break those out, if you break those post-harvest prices out into a futures price and a basis price, out of the last 10 years, 80% of the increase in local cash price has come from an increase in basis rather than an increase in futures price. So it's really that local elevator saying, hey, okay, I need grain in my elevator now. We told you to store it. Now we need the grain. That's when you move it to the market.
Very good. Well, our time is up. Ben, thank you.
We did get through it all, Chris.
We did get through it all. But thank you for joining us here on the Ask the Expert stage. I noticed that David put your email address in there, brown.6888@osu.edu. So if somebody wants to follow up with Ben on any of the information he shared, that would be the way to do that. So thank you, Ben.